Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. Today's guest is Michael Mahony, co-founder of the Berkeley Partnership. Michael was one of the 4 founding partners of the Berkeley Partnership, growing it from an idea to where it is today. In 2018, Michael retired from Berkeley and now works with a number of consulting firms, helping them shape their business strategies. Founded in 1990, the Berkeley Partnership is an independent management consultancy who work with many household names and global organizations to help them develop strategies and transform their businesses. The Berkeley Partnership are unique in a number of ways and have successfully grown their business while doing the opposite of what most people would consider conventional consulting wisdom. For example, they are industry agnostic. They only recruit from the upper grades in consulting. They have an extremely low partner to consultant ratio, and they are heavily focused on limiting the amount of travel that their consultants have to do while delivering for their clients. The fascinating thing about Berkeley is that they've been able to build a thriving business by doing all of this. And as Michael explained in our conversation, they've created a place that the partners and consultants want to work. Knowing some of the Berkeley story beforehand as I did, I've always been intrigued by their business model and how they'd been so successful while pursuing such an unorthodox approach. So when I was introduced to Michael, I jumped at the chance to get him on the show. We cover so many interesting topics in this conversation, including what led Michael and his co-founders to launch Berkeley and how they managed to survive their early years, launching the business as they did just before the 1991 recession. The Berkeley Partnership business model and how the team decided to set the firm up as they did, and Michael's advice to others thinking about launching their own consulting businesses. I really enjoyed this conversation with Michael, and it was great to get so much advice and insight from someone who has been involved in the industry for as long as he has. If you are a partner thinking about how to improve your own business or a consultant thinking about going out on your own, then this interview is a must listen. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Michael Mahony. Hi there, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Well, and thank you for having me to your lovely home to record. I'm really looking forward to this. So To kick things off, for those who maybe don't know you so well, it'd be great to just find out about your career so far and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, that's a big question to start off with. So you go back a long time, 1980, graduated, or thereabouts. And in those days, hard to think back to it, but computers were relatively new. I did electronics engineering and computer science at University College London. And where do you go? Most of the people on my course headed off to the city because they could all program in COBOL and do these great things. But I went off to a software house because it was much more exciting. So I was learning to program satellite systems, military systems, all sorts of really state-of-the-art stuff. But after about 3 years, I realized that this was much, much more exciting and I would say where the brightest graduates went. But the guys in the city doing the boring COBOL program were earning a lot more money than me and having a much better life. So I made a big change straight away, went and joined Chase Manhattan Bank as a systems auditor. It's quite interesting. They had this idea that any major program they were doing, they ranked it on risk to the business and to their customers. And there were 6 of us for the whole of Middle East and Africa and Europe. And
it's quite a broad region, isn't it, for 6 of you?
For 6 of us. And what would happen is if there was a project, one of us would go in and go up to the program project manager and say, hello, I'm from audit, systems audit, and I've come here to audit what you're doing in terms of the technical capabilities of this program and your managerial capabilities. Right. So as a 25-year-old, this was a bit tough. One of my favorite ones was Chase had taken over a bank in Holland. And the Dutch government said, look, you can have a banking license in Holland if you take over our awful telebanking business we've got. So Chase had to go in and turn this into a proper bank, which meant changing all their computer systems, all their operations, everything. So you can imagine this is a really big program. And the guy running it was quite a serious program manager. So one day, 25-year-old me turned up and said, I'm going to audit you. He wasn't best pleased. We built a rapport after a little while. But on that, I learned a huge amount that was going to help me with the rest of my career because it meant I understood how programs could be run. More importantly, how you actually manage to get on with people. So how can I get this guy to trust me and realize that actually I'm not just a nuisance and I could help him. So I did all that. And while I was at Chase, suddenly saw in the corner these strange people I'd never come across before, which were management consultants, Accenture, or Anderson Consulting as they were at the time. And I looked at them and I thought, well, they're having a good time. I'd quite like to be one of those. So I went and joined Anderson Consulting, and that was my first step into the world of consultancy. They sent me off to Newcastle on a pensions program, which is probably still going. And there was 100 or so of us up there from all around the world working in Long Benton, 12,000 people in porter cabins on the outskirts of Newcastle. And there I sort of learned about actually the innards of a big program and what was going on. But great fun. But then as something was important for when we set up Berkeley, people's lives change. So in your 20s, flying up every Monday morning to Newcastle, coming back on Friday, it's quite fun. But you get married, you have children, and it's not what you want anymore. So I ended up leaving there and going off to a company called Sear that nobody will ever have heard of now. And Sear sold me a pup, actually. So I was sitting in Newcastle panicking. The minute you want to leave a job, you start panicking. And particularly if you're in Newcastle, because you can't go to interviews, there's no way out. Terrible feeling of I'm trapped. And Sear came along and they had a brilliant proposition. They said, look, if you really want to make money, you don't want to do consultancy. You want to do stuff that leverages. What does leverage mean? That's a great word. And so what we do is we have got all the component parts that startup businesses need. We have a management consultancy business. That's what you would join, Michael. We've got a marketing consultancy. We've got a recruitment consultancy. We've got a corporate finance consultancy. We've also got a secretarial recruitment thing, which was, I don't know what that fitted in. And what we do is we sell our services. We find startup businesses, and instead of getting fees, we take equity in those businesses. Equity, that's a big word as well. And if we're doing what we do, these companies will grow, and in 5 years' time, we make a shed load of money, and it's all Shazam. And I bought this because I was wide-eyed 30-year-old. Great idea. I stayed there 9 months, and I learned more in those 9 months I've ever learned since, because first thing I tell anybody listening to this talk, you learn more when things are going wrong than when things are going right. So I learned how not to do it. So the couple of things I learned from that, which sounds pretty obvious. One is it's one thing having a big idea. It's another thing making it happen. And the reason they didn't make it happen was they had bad people. They didn't have the right people. So I would say this. So actually the consultancy bit, it was 6 of us. And we were really good. The rest of it, there was sort of 45 other people, and they were useless. Didn't know what they were doing. We were lucky in our little bit that our major client was Marks and Spencer. So as this company was floundering through my 9 months, we did what a lot of businesses do. We hived off. We left. We set up Berkeley Partnership, and Marks and Spencer said, that's fine. We don't care whose name is on the invoice as long as it's you guys. So I learned my second lesson, which is it's about the relationships. So that's the thing for me. It's about the people you've got working for you. It's about the relationships with your clients. And those are the 2 fundamental facts I learned in those 9 months.
Help me place that, because I think it brings us quite nicely onto the Berkeley story. So the founders of Berkeley were the 6 seer.
There were 4 of the 6.
Oh, how did you? What happened to the other 2?
Oh, they might be listening to this. So what's fascinating at the time? I think there are 2 competing views in most people that do consultancy. One is the desire to be autonomous and do your own thing and work on your own thing. And there's also a big desire to be part of a team. Now, depending where you are on that spectrum, if you really want to be on part of a team, I would say to people, your best place to be is in a big consultancy firm, because in there, part of a big team, you're never going to be right at the sharp end of on your own with a client. You can be looked after. They've got all sorts of methodologies. They've got all stuff to make you feel happy in your team. If you just want to be autonomous, then the best thing is to be an independent consultant, because you're in charge of your own career, you're in charge of who you work for and do the thing. I'm a strange breed where I have a need for both of those things, which is what Berkeley did for me, because setting up Berkeley, I'm part of, in those early days, 4 of us, we were part of a team, and yet I feel and still feel that I'm totally autonomous in what I'm doing with my clients and how I'm dealing with what I'm doing. So Berkeley was a wonderful construct for people that want to be autonomous, but also want to be part of a team. It always go back to the ranch and feel you're part of a team.
And we'll come on to more about the cultural side, because I know that from the little I do know about Berkeley, that strikes me as quite unique.
Actually, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
Just to remind you asked me about what happened to the other 2, and I think what happened to the other 2 was they went off to be independent contractors. So when we set Berkeley up, it was quite an interesting thing where 2 of us were working full-time assignments for Marks and Spencer, but 2 weren't. So the leap of faith you have to make in that situation is to say, I could stay working full-time for Marks and Spencer and take all the fees, or I could put the fees into the pot and only have half of them because those 2 guys aren't earning anything, and I can believe that over the fullness of time, they're going to be marketing us and they're going to be doing things which are not as, they're not earning fees directly. And that is at the heart of, I think, any partnership or group of people that set up a consultancy together. How do you measure the values of doing work versus getting work, lunching, messing about, reading books, and how does it all go together? So the other 2 guys decided we're just going to go and be independent consultants.
Well, and yeah, it's good to know. When people say things like that, I'm always curious what happened to the others, and particularly for the reason being that a number of my listeners are either consulting entrepreneurs themselves or have aspirations to go out on their own and launch their own consultancy. And I think I'd be interested on that point of actually the conversations or that decision point, because like you said, the SEER business wasn't working out or wasn't going well. Now, 2 of the 6 said, right, well, we'll just go and, we'll go and be independents. But actually, what led the 4 of you to say, let's try this on our own versus, let's go to a big consultancy or conversely, let's go and join another startup consultancy and just take our skills there?
I think some of it is just personal. It's what motivates you, and it goes back to my point. Do you want to be part of a team? Do you not want to be part of a team? What absolutely motivates you? We all liked each other and trusted each other, which is a really important thing, and respected each other. So we all had complementary skills, I think, and we could see that. And the sense you can't test at the time, but that we will be stronger together than we will be individually is something you can't quite quantify. So that was it. We just thought, we'll do this together. The other thing I would say, though, that struck me over the years, it's very easy when you think about how these things set up to post-rationalize, and it all looks very, we were these wonderful entrepreneurs that all went off with a great idea. But actually, I think that a lot of people setting businesses up is because they haven't got any real options. So if you think about it, I've been at Anderson Consulting, I've been at this terrible disaster of a company for 9 months. What was facing me at 30? I could have gone back. I had a job offer from KPMG in one of their regional offices. I could have gone, some consultancy. But at the time, I'd left Anderson, and Anderson, they still do, I think, did a great culture, which is if you work for them, they do imbibe in you the fact you're working for the best consultancy on earth, and that you're one of the SAS of consultancy. And if you go anywhere else, second rate. So the thought of going to KPMG would just be disastrous, a terrible thought. So I had no choice. I had a 6-month-old child, had a wife who didn't know any of this was going on, and what do I do? So although it looking back on it, great entrepreneurial stuff, it was almost that we had nothing else we could do. I know that sounds terrible.
No, it doesn't. What I find so interesting about the people I speak to is the variety of ways they started their own business, and then to what you said, why and how. I think the other side of that, what led you to launch it, though, you mentioned there, you had a wife, you had a young child, and I speak to a lot of people who would love to do something like what you did, or just something more entrepreneurial, but by the time you get to 30, I'm now there as well. We don't have kids yet, but you have a lot of commitments, a lot of things you need to, mortgage, etc. Actually, what were the conversations either you and your wife had, or you thought about from that side of things to ensure that you were comfortable taking this risk while still being able to provide for the family, or whatever it was that you were concerned about?
Well, I think if I look back, it was a worrying time, but I think one of the things that, again, it goes back to personal things. You have to be an optimist to do these things. And, genuinely, if I look back, I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about the risks. I just thought, I've got these guys, we've got an opportunity, we've got a client, let's get on with it. And I think a lot of people analyze things too far. You can spend your time analyzing stuff and you never do anything. So it was much more instinct. Just get on with it. I certainly didn't dwell on the risks.
Did any of your team, any of your other three co-founders?
No, and I think that was part of why we all got on. It was very similar view too. Nothing else we can do. We can sit here and worry about the risk, and we can get spreadsheets till we come blue in the face working out. But I remember sitting with them in a pub. We were going through trying to decide. Actually, one of the most interesting things is how the genesis of a company. So how do you get 4 people to actually agree to do this? And when do you make the leap? And we spent many times in a pub going through spreadsheets and everything. And the only thing that you just prompted me to think, it's a very small episode, but we were going through these and the spreadsheet, and there was a line for company car. And a great example of what's changed in these years is, in those days, the mark of success was to have a company car. I mean, nobody cares about company cars now. Nobody wants cars anymore. But to have a company car was really important. So we go down this list, and somebody said, well, look, I've got children. I need a company car. And the other 3 of us said, all right, put company car in for you. And then we're going to move on. And we say, no. And then somebody said, oh, well, actually, I'd quite like a company car too. So before you know it, we had 4 company cars on some long-term lease, which was a complete disaster. And if I look back, that was the biggest mistake we made. Well, why would we? But it was all emotional.
Well,
even thinking about it now makes me laugh.
But I guess that is the interesting thing, isn't it? When you bring people together to create a business, is that how do you balance those competing priorities and needs? And obviously, the solution there was give everyone a car, but actually how you get everyone. Were there any other examples where you had those tensions that you had to overcome in those early days of?
We felt, I think I learned a lot in those 9 months at the other company. But so one of the things we had right from the beginning was be absolutely pure on the finance side of it. Keep everything else out of it. This is very pure on the finance side of it was quite important for us.
And is that something that we'll come on to the sort of how the company grew, but did that sustain throughout? Did
Yeah,
that,
no,
yeah.
I mean, it changed. We do now do charity things and so on and so forth. But in those early days, it was very useful to have quite clear guidelines about what is company and what is not company, what is helping us to do this business and what's not.
And talking about those early days, because it's something, and you might say actually had no effect, but looking at when you launched the company, which was sort of late 1990, if I'm correct there, almost the next year, UK went into one of the biggest recessions for a long time. I'd be really interested about actually how you navigated and overcame that period, and actually what you learned from it.
It's worth just pointing out one thing about Berkeley, which is it's now 100 people after 30 years. So that's not stellar growth in terms of numbers of people. And a number of reasons for that. But one of them is we felt really strongly it is a relationship-based consultancy. All our work is really sold through relationships we've got, follow-on work, referrals. And it's at the heart of it. So I think, because I have thought about the recession since then, if you've got a period where you're working deep relationships with people, it tends to protect you against the recession and so on. You've got that work. If you're out there trying to get work in a recession, you're marketing yourself, saying, "I've got something you want. Come and buy it from me." That's very, very different from I'm working with you. I've got a relationship with you. You know we're doing good, and we know you're doing stuff. It kind of works, and I think that protected us through it. And it means that our sales over the years have been relatively flat. Not flat is the wrong word, but not big changes in it. But it's the relationship side of it.
Did that persevere? Because obviously since then we've had 2 recessions, and we're due another one if you believe they come every 10 years. Did that same philosophy hold true in, say, 2001 and 2007?
All the way through. And it's the way you get your business. So we very little traditional marketing. So we're not out there saying, "Here's my suitcase, here's what I've got. Would you like some of it?" It's working with people who say, "I've got something I know you can do. Can you come and help me?" And that's a heart of everything. So the hardest thing is what we do for a living. I fervently believe is industry agnostic. You can run transformation programs in oil and gas. You can run it in retail, more or less. If you can run a big transformation program, you can run a big transformation program. But clients don't see that. So if I'm trying to sell you, if you're Shell and I'm trying to sell you that I can run your big transformation program, the first question you'll ask me is, "Have you got any experience in oil and gas?" And when I say no, you just show me the door. However, if I've worked with you in retail before and you've now moved to Shell and you've got a big problem, you'll say, "I'm not asking you. I don't care if you've worked here. I know you can do this. I've seen you do it before. Come and help me." And then when I come and help you at Shell, I then establish a presence in Shell and I get a reputation there, and I can do more work, and then I can work in that. But that's how the relationship works.
How did you keep those relationships warm, to use, for want of a better word? Because in that example, you might not be doing work for the client before they moved to Shell, but then they've moved, and because you worked with them 3 years ago, they know you, they know Michael, you're a good guy. What did you do, and what did you teach your team around actually keeping relationships warm in a way that builds a relationship and doesn't just feel like a sort of continual sales calls?
There's a real skill in this, and I think anybody that wants to be successful in what we do for a living needs to be able to do this. And part of it is natural, but part of it can be learned, and it can be. But most of it is that you need to want to do it, and you need to have a genuine interest in other people and what they're up to. It's the same as your friendships or all your friends. Why do people want to see you? Why do they want to go out with you? Same thing in business. It's not different. And building those relationships take a lot of effort, a lot of work, and getting to the sense where you don't think it's cynical and you don't come across as cynical is a skill in it. And you just need to want to do it.
I like what you say there. Actually, that I think quite often people paint a dichotomy between how you approach friends and how you approach business people.
Totally the same. And you're absolutely right. I tell all my unique clients, it's exactly the same. All the things you do in your social life, turn up on time, don't let your friends down. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Do that in business too. The rules of the game are exactly the same. They're not different.
You've highlighted a few of the unique elements of Berkeley and how you set up the business. And particularly for those who are less familiar with it, it'd be really interesting to just have a bit of a talk about some of those differences and how you set up and develop the business model. Because what I know about Berkeley is that you have some elements that I'd say are quite different from the traditional consulting firms, let's say. So you don't have a pyramid, you highlight, you're very much relationship focused, as I understand, very much small team, delivery team focused. Be great to just understand what those, for you, those core principles were and how they came about.
I think going right back to when there was just four of us, we sat in a room and we put a whiteboard up or a flip chart and said, right, how are we going to organise ourselves? And we started off because we all got big four backgrounds. Right, we're going to remunerate ourselves, it's how much, X percent to how much business you brought in, blah, blah, blah. And then at one point it just dawned on me, I said, hang on, there's only four of us. And each of us is as valuable to this enterprise as the others. And I go back to what I said earlier, two of us are working full time and two of us aren't. But that doesn't make you less or more valuable than the two guys that are working. So why don't we, and we came up with something I think is unique from people I talk to, is how we remunerate partners. So I think it's right from day one, we said, right, every partner gets the same. Okay, if a new partner joins, then you're going to get less. So what we'll do is each year, every partner gets 10 points. Start off on a base of 50. Yeah, it could be anything. And every year, every partner gets 10.
As in 10 additional.
10 additional points.
Year two, you have 60. Is that right?
70. Now, if I became a new partner and you'd been a partner for 5 years, you're on 100 points and I'm on 50. So at the end of the year, you get double the profit share that I'd get. But the next year, you don't quite get double because I've got 60 and you've got 110. And I start creeping up on you. But I realised that mathematically, I'm never going to catch you. So we then brought in a thing which was after 10 years, there's a limit. You get no more points. So 150 points, no more for you. And what that says is each partner then is working at his full potential and all the other partners are kind of coming up to that full potential, but then you're at your full potential. So it seemed equitable and fair to us that was the way it was going to work. Now, still do that. 30 years on, that works fantastic. And what it does is it brings some really good behaviours from partners. So partners will share work. So when I looked at Accenture, where they're on a much more, you get paid performance bonuses, how much business you gain, you would never share a job with a fellow partner. But at Berkeley, it's very, if I'm overloaded and I've got a new client coming in, I'll give it to another partner. Very positive community type action. So that simple model brings in, we think, some fantastic behaviours amongst partners. It stops us thinking about our slice of the pie. It keeps us all thinking about how do we make the pie even bigger. And that, I think, is for me, the epitome of Berkeley. It demonstrates that this is a community of us all working together. Now, of course, that model, the downside of it is if people start misbehaving or not, or just not performing. And our view always was, deal with that problem if it turns up, but don't assume that's the problem. Start off that everyone's working as hard as they can, doing what they can do at any one time.
And I really like that view because I think it was actually my first guest, Matt Chung from Clarisys, made a similar point that, and I know you know Matt, that so many policies are written in the or you assume the negative, someone's going to do wrong. I'm curious because there'll be, I do have people who are partners in consulting firms who listen to this, and I'd be curious on the example you gave and another one. So I'd be interested, did that ever happen? So, did a partner get to 100 points and then, I'm not going to say they checked out, but slowed down. And also what happened, and maybe it was, this never happened either, but what happened if a new partner came in and just, from a what they brought in perspective, was just absolutely smashing it, was bringing in a ton of work and actually said, well, hang on guys, I've done much more than my share. I want to be accelerated through these points. Did either of those happen? And if so, how did you manage them?
No. I think individual partners thought those things, but the strength of the culture and the fact it'd been going so long meant that people sat back. And I've seen partners over the years, their partners will have a fantastic year where loads of stuff are coming in, and then following year they haven't. They sit in the corner. And when you've seen this for 30 years, you realise there's ebb and flow and all this. So just sit back. This model works, and it really does. If you've got the right people, right motivated people, it's a tremendous model, and it does make people work for the common good of the whole rather than the individual good. I remember we had, there was a Harvard Business Review article, which is, what is the purpose of your firm? And this was many years ago when everyone was going on about mission statements and things. So it's not a mission statement, it's the purpose of your firm. And he used some example about Disney figuring out the purpose was to make people happy rather than making the best cartoon films, which is, he claims, which is why they then got theme parks. Wouldn't have done otherwise. Anyway, we had a discussion about what's the purpose of the firm, and all sorts of things. But mine, which the partners used to cringe when I said it, but actually I still believe it, which is the purpose of the firm was to make a place that we all want to work in. Now, why that makes you cringe is because it doesn't mention clients. You know, most people say, oh, we want to do the best work for clients in possibly. No, once you say, we want to create a place that we want to work in, it measures everything. So if you then get a client, do we want to work for them? If we don't want to work for them, if we think that's going to make this environment not a place we want to work, you don't work for them. Now, of course, you say, oh, we'd like a company where we all 4 days off a week. Well, yes, well, then we're going to make no money. Is that an environment you want to work in? No. See, but the key thing on all that, I think one of the highlights of Berkeley is travel. So I mentioned before that I worked, long term up in Newcastle. So one of the key things that Berkeley offer, and which is why Berkeley can get such great talent, I think, is we won't put you on a long-term out-of-town assignment unless, for where it is or what it is, you'd like to do it. So what we mean by that is you're not going to get stuck in Newcastle for 6 months plus. And that no one else says that. Now, on the other hand, we are a consultancy firm, so you can't say you're not going to travel at all. So if you're working for BP, you need to go to Houston for 2 weeks, go to Houston for 2 weeks. Working for WH Smith, you need to go to Swindon for 2 weeks. So these things are part and parcel of it, but we will not send you off out of town. And that's, if we send people up to Newcastle for a year and a half, does that make the environment a place we want to work in? No. So we don't do it.
And we'll come on to the travel and some of those elements, because there are a number around your business model that I'd say are unorthodox in consulting like that. And actually, I'd be really interested in exploring how you made a success of it. To your mission statement, and I really like it because I think so many large corporates have very vague mission statements that you can't tangibly do anything with. How did you manage, if there was any, tension as you grew? Because when there's four of you, the we is quite easy to have a discussion in the pub. Do we like this? As the partnership grew, as the firm grew, you mentioned, it's now 100 people. How did you keep that pulse check to make sure that the decisions that you and the leadership team were making were for the we of the whole firm and not maybe the we of the partnership or the we of the founders?
First, it comes from choosing the right people to be part of the partnership group. So you have to have a common view. There's always going to be a spread, a spectrum. The other point is that when it all comes down to it, you don't make many choices. You don't make many decisions, really. Once the engine starts going, the culture is there where people make decisions almost instinctively. So there are very few big decisions where you all have to sit down and have to have a vote. We never had a vote on anything. Never had a vote, ever. The things come along. So I think that group management is a wonderful way of running something when things are going well. And things luckily have gone well. Well, not luckily, but they've gone well for a long time, so it's fine. I think we would, and I think anybody running a sort of consensus management like that would have real trouble in dark times when you need someone to come in and say, I'm in charge. So the thing about Berkeley, one of the things that again, no one else does is there is no managing partner. So it is just the group. But if things went wrong, I think that would be challenged.
And then, so maybe it's, like you say, and the good times it works. How, for decision making where a direction was required, how did that work? So I'm thinking, and this might not be directly applicable, but let's say you've got a lot of clients in one industry and two partners want to go into different industries. One says we'll go into oil and gas. The other says no, we should go into FS. Is that a moot point because of your relationship network drives your demand, or did you ever have to have a conversation like that? And how did those strategic decisions get made?
Again, I'm trying to think of any real strategic decisions. Oh no, actually I've got one, which is moving to the US. So setting up a US office was most recent thing. And how that happens is, in a group like this, a lot of discussions over a long period of time. And I think somebody who'd come from a more traditional situation would find it quite painful So that takes a very, very long time. And in fact, the partner that was progressing this, I'm sure, found it very painful because it's about talking to people, individually, then come together as a group, going away again. It takes a very long time, but did it, and it's a great thing to happen. But you would get very frustrated, I think, if you're trying to get that really key strategic decision made. You start thinking, if only we had a managing partner, he could just say, yay or nay, we're doing it or we're not doing it, rather than the consensus that you have to come to. But, on balance, it works really well.
And there's something coming out here around just that long-term nature of what you set up. The whole partner remuneration was built on the idea that you would stay for at least a decade. The decision making, like you said, it's sort of build the firm as it goes. And I'm really interested around where that came from, because I've spoken to a number of consulting entrepreneurs where their goal has been build, sell. So build over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, sell or merge. And the thing that stands out for me with Berkeley is everything you said and the longevity of the firm as an independent. Where did that come from?
I think some of it is from what it was like in the 80s, which was a different time. So there was no sense in our mind that we would set the firm up as a limited company because we came from partnerships. I remember being at Accenture and the head partner turned up and saying, we're an ocean liner was the metaphor. Partners drop on, they do the work and then they drop off, but the Anderson ocean liner just keeps going. So that idea of the way to structure a professional service firm is a partnership was kind of ingrained in us, and that it would be that ocean liner. Now, 30 years on, I think the world has changed. I don't think there are that many partnerships left. I think Anderson sold out, sold up. Maybe it'd be different now. I don't know. But the reason we did it and the longevity was, I think it was what we all just assumed would be the way to do professional services.
It's a really interesting point you make around how the generations have changed. And did you see, or did you get a sense from your junior team that there were any changes in that desire? In the people you hired in the 90s may want to stay for 30 years, but as as we moved into the noughties and where we are now, there was more of a shift in what people wanted, or did that persevere?
No, I think there's been a huge shift in what people want. I think that idea of a job for life. So not just we were consultants, but all our clients. So Marks and Spencer is a great example. If you joined Marks and Spencer, you were there for life. They would provide you with healthcare, dentists, hairdressers. It was a commune really. And it's not anymore. And I think all those companies that's all stopped. And it's true of consultancies as well. So one of the big changes, I think, is if somebody's going to start up a consultancy now or start up a business, is it's much more usual now. Back in those days, it wasn't usual. The mind of everyone was join a company, be it a consultancy or not, and just stay there. So if you joined Accenture, your idea would be, I'm going to be here and be a partner. And if I'm not, they'll chuck me out. But that's what I want to do. No, people now, I think, see it much more as, let me get everything I can from this company and let me contribute as much as I can while I'm here. But let's neither of us have that sort of sense that I'm here for life. And it's the last great taboo, I think, of working life, which is people talking about leaving. When I interview people, I always talk about, you'll be gone more than likely in 5 years' time. Terrible taboo, but it's true. And that's if people be more honest about this and see that, what can you give me in order that when I move on, I'm going to be better than I am now is the question that people should be asking in an interview.
And that might be the crux of it. How did you, or how do you advise people to now, to embrace that conversation and build let's call it an employee experience, for want of a better word, that gets that mutual benefit in an open way and doesn't pretend it's something it's no longer.
You've put your finger right on it there, because I think that is now an ongoing process. As I say, it's the last taboo, and I think companies are just beginning to try and open it up, and employees as well. I would love a thing where you sit down and it's just honest, which is, Michael, what can you give me over the next 3 to 5 years that's going to make me even better than I'm now and can give me a launch pad into what I want to do? You know what, Michael, I'm not quite sure what I want to do, but what is it you can give me that will help me decide what I want to do? And maybe one of those things is stay with you and become a partner here, but that's by no means what I want. I always used to say to people in interview, look, if I offered you a job now, if I offered you partnership right now, the sensible thing for you to say is no. And the reason for that is you don't know me. You don't. Why would you become a partner in this firm and put your house on the line, your wife, your children, your dogs on the line? You don't know me. What you should say to me is, I like the look of this firm. I'm going to come here and I'll work for a while. And if in that period of courtship, we kind of like each other, then let's start talking about partnership. But it's not something I'm joining you to do. And that's the honest approach that everybody should try and have.
I think, like you say, and I think it still is a taboo, and that I know that there will have been times for myself, and I'm sure for others, where feeling comfortable enough to have that level of conversation, the sort of the why do you want to work for us conversation, when I was 10 years applying for graduate schemes, the answer was all the superlatives about how great the company was, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I don't know if I would have felt comfortable enough, or even would have sort of a few years ago saying, actually, look, I'm here for a few years and then I'm off. But I think I
wouldn't quite put it like that.
No, of course. It needs a better delivery. But I think there is a key point you make there actually about how companies can play their part and actually make the people they're hiring or talking to feel comfortable to be that open. And I want to come on to, you mentioned around more people starting businesses, and we'll talk about that and your advice for them. But I want to touch on a few more elements of the Berkeley model, just because they really interested me, and I know will be interesting for others, of the archetypal consulting firm, the Andersons as was, and other firms as are now. They're predicated on a big pyramid. You land and expand. We've all heard the cliches, and that's how you build a consulting business. Now, my understanding, as I say, with Berkeley is those two, what you might call core consulting principles, you did exactly the opposite. You built senior, you didn't even build a barrel, you built the sort of just the upper half, and you deliberately focused on high value roles, small teams. And I'd just be fascinated on how you made that work, because common consulting wisdom would say you can't build a successful consulting business doing those two things.
So I go back to the thing I keep mentioning, which is relationships. So what's important to us is the real relationship with your client. So if you've got a massive pyramid, then all the people in that pyramid just can't have those deep relationships. It's a place we start from. How do you make it work? Well, the lack of a pyramid, key part, I think, of Berkeley's business model is the ratio of partner to consultant is about 1 to 3.5. Now, if you go to any other place, 1 to 15, perhaps, maybe even more. Now, that's got two huge advantages, I think, from a consultancy perspective. One is for the consultants themselves. So what I say to people, you are going to have a huge amount of partner time. Now, you might think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I passionately believe that the way consultancy is something that you need to learn by watching more experienced people do it. Our office was in Chancery Lane, and opposite us was the barristers in Lincoln's Inn. And you look across there, and the barristers have figured it out. 500 years. How do you become a good barrister? Well, you get a pupil and a pupil master, and you watch a more experienced barrister do his stuff. Because those are the skills of consultancy, very tacit. You can't write down how to do it. You have to watch somebody do it. Really good consultants are great at those soft skills, and they get it from other people. So having a situation where you get a load of partner time, which you get when it's 1 to 3.5, is fantastic for people's career, because they learn how to be good consultants very, very quickly, and they're not hidden away. So it's great for consultants, but also it's great for clients. So when I go to my client, I say, you see me all the time. I'm actually working on this job. I haven't got 15 people that I just turn up once a month and say hello to you and shake your hand. I'm here all the time. And that is great for clients. And it builds the relationships, because they know that you're there and you're there all the time. So that works brilliantly from getting really good consultants, you've got something to offer them, and you get continued work because you've got relationships. And then consultancy is a very simple business. It boils down to utilization, fee rates. That's it. So if you've got those relationships, you're working at those high levels, you can charge higher fee rates. And if you've got the relationships where you get lots of work, you've got high utilization. High utilization, high fee rates, good. Profitable.
Well, when you put it like that, it sounds easy. So that model works perfectly if you can make it work. You might not have had this, but how do you balance that tension, though, when clients if clients sort of, you're having that conversation and they say, well, Michael, your guys are great and they're whatever day rate this is, but this other consultancy is going to give me a team of 7 for the same rate. What, when you get that pressure on fees, or is that where your relationship and the strength of it comes in, or how do you?
So I think one of the big changes in consultancy I've seen over the last 10 years is the growth of the procurement department.
Yeah.
I've never met a computer. I didn't know what they were. I remember the first person came up to me 10 years ago, maybe 15, and said, hello, I'm from the procurement department. I didn't know who he was. But their power, I think, is a real change in the industry over the last 10, 15 years. And we do get pressure on this sort of thing. And I have to say, my general attempt is I don't even want to get into a discussion about that. So you know what my value is. We've got a track record here, and we've worked for you, and we've done this. I'm not moving. And if you don't want it, we'll go somewhere. Now, it's, in a fortunate position that we're so confident in what we provide and what our service is that you can just walk away from those discussions. If you want to buy, and also I think there's something which is making sure you're doing the right job. So if you want a £500 a day project manager, that's fine if you've got a £500 a day project. If you've got a £100 million program, then you don't spend £500 a day on a project manager for that. You just don't.
You hit on 2 key pieces that, if you have more thoughts on, would be interesting. Is actually that selling for value, and actually it's not, you're not selling 10 days of Jane or Bob's time. You're selling an outcome, but also actually that picking the projects and the clients. In that, if the client, even if they do have a £100 million project, but they only in their mind want a £500 a day PM, you're never going to sell them on anything else.
No, and it's pointless. Walk away.
And I think that's where, for me, that just resonates, because I think so often you can chase, people can be busy being busy, and actually that step back of saying, well, will this client actually buy that? Are they in a place to buy that? Because there's no harm that they might not be at that point.
No. You have to qualify these things, and sometimes it's just no point. Walk away. And
was there ever, as the business grew, was there ever a conversation or a pressure or just a feeling that actually maybe we should expand? Because am I right in sort of classic parlance, you would recruit manager and upwards, so sort of 6-7 years upwards?
Yeah, so I would say 8 years experience up. Typically, there'd be a manager at Accenture.
And was there ever a conversation among the partners, or a question of, well, if we just drop that to 6, well, these guys they need a lower salary, and then you get your utilization, your numbers, and you go, oh, we're all getting a bit more money this year. Was there ever that conversation? If so,
Yeah, that comes up every 3 years, I think. So it's and a lot of it is driven by the consultants, actually. So you get people who join as managers, and they're quite used to having bag carriers, so guys to do their slides for them. And so they find it quite tricky to come to Berkeley. And it's a sort of sense of, if we just had more junior people, they could do something. And it comes up every couple of years, but the figures don't work out. You can do it, but the unexpected consequences, I think, of training them, of looking after them, of trying to load them, we always think in the end, no, our business model works fine. But there's always pressure to get some more junior bag carriers.
You've obviously done the thinking about it, and that point sounds really interesting. And the figures actually don't work out. What were the ahas that actually, when you did someone did the analysis, you saw this doesn't work out because actually, is it the cost of training? Is it the impact it has on relationship? What were the key drivers that said, actually, no, this isn't,
I would go back to what I said earlier. I passionately think the strong thing is the 1 to 3.5 partner consultant ratio. I think the relationship I have with my consultants, the closeness to them, is really important. The minute you start making the pyramid a bit bigger that way, you as a partner begin to lose contact with people, because what would happen is they'd have a relationship with the managers. I wouldn't know who these people were, and I think that would fundamentally attack some of the key aspects of the model. And going back to does this make a place I want to work? It doesn't. It makes it worse. The other thing about junior people is we recruit 7 years or so, 7 years plus in. And why that's really good is, at that point, the people you recruit have decided that they want to be management consultants. And also, they've figured out if they're any good at it. And so we're able to see who are the really good people because they've had 7 years having a go. So if you recruit at that point, much, much easier to get who are the top guys or girls that we want. Where if you take them out of university, much, much harder. You know, who's going to actually want to be a consultant? Who's going to fall by the wayside? Who's going to be any good at this? So
again, I think it's like you say, you can see who's in it for the long term and who's the winners and pick from them. So, when you put it like that, why wouldn't you?
Well, I always think of Accenture as our creche.
I'm sure they'll love that. If anyone from Accenture is listening. And something on your point around when you bring people in and your structure, fact check me here. So if I'm completely wrong on this, we'll move on. But my understanding is Berkeley does and has always only had 2 grades. It has partners and consultants. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, that's right.
And then again, it's another, I guess, a common practice in consulting of you have the grades and you climb the pyramid and almost, you obviously start the pyramid higher up, but there's still someone would come as a manager in an Accenture, let's say, or a senior manager, etc. How did you structure that to give both the individuals and the clients that sort of sense of progression and seniority? And what I mean by that is, some people like the fact that I'm aiming for promotion, I'm aiming for senior manager or director. And actually, if the goal is I'm a manager right now and in 5 years or 10 years I can be a partner, for some, I suspect that feels like too big a gulf. How did you structure that career progression internally? Let's start there and we'll come on to external after.
That's an interesting point. And so I'd say that we recruit and consultancies recruit ambitious, bright people. And what most consultancies figure out is that if you can put in some sort of internal tension between those bright people, it brings the best out of them. And you've described it. And so how do you bring in some internal tension? Well, the obvious one is grading structure. I'm an M1, I'm M2, I'm M45, I'm M46. Tension. But how do you bring in tension? You bring in industry groups. We're working for the banking sector. We're working for industry sector. Tension. You bring in all these internal tensions, which consultancies think that brings out the best in people. And it probably does in most of them. There are also people that are bright and ambitious, but that doesn't work for them. What they want is to work in somewhere where they're not fighting or having tension with their partners. They're in a cooperative environment. And I think that's what Berkeley tried to create, is a cooperative environment for bright, ambitious people. Take away all those internal tensions so that people can put all their energy into dealing with clients and doing that stuff rather than internally. So the idea of grades, we thought, won't have that for that reason. We don't have industry sectors. We don't do these things. Now, of course, like everything you do, there's a downside. So the downside is actually some people do use their grades as a way of measuring their progression. So what you have to do is recognize that as a downside and put some mitigating factors in. So find another way internally of how you show people they're progressing and they're moving on without having these little badges. But no doubt, some people find it a little bit disconcerting. But as I said to some consultants once, we can call you anything you like. If you just tell me what you master of the universe, we'll put that on your business card. It doesn't really matter.
That'd be a great business card, wouldn't it?
And they never really came back on that. So actually, I think internally it works now. We've done it for so long. Externally, you do occasionally come up with rate cards and what have you. So you've got to sort of subscribe to the senior manager, director, put them on your rate cards.
You mentioned you put some structures in place on the internal side. What were they to give people, like you say, that progression and that sense of direction without and I love the word, without that tension of I'm a manager or a senior manager or a senior, junior director or whatever they wanted on that business card?
Well, and one of the things, right from the beginning, we try not to have a lot of structure or rules or whatever. The view is we're recruiting grown-up people now. Their experience of grown up, so you don't have to put a load of structures around them, which you might have to with people leaving college. But one of the things we did put some structure around, I'm very proud of, is we've got very good personal development approach. And so the view was everybody's on their own ladder. You're not on a ladder behind someone else that you have to climb over. And so we treated everybody on their own ladder and very personal development. Big backdrop about, there's 8 competencies versus 6 levels, which is a bit of structure, which has been anathema to most of us, but it works great. And it does give everybody a sense that they are progressing on their own ladder. And I think it works very well. And it's not to do with other people. It's not to do with how are you doing against them. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm just, that point around client perception, I think is a really interesting one because like you say, the clients will, from a rate card procurement, again, procurement like a rate card because they can compare them. And it might be back to the conversation we had about relationships. How did you help clients understand that just because you call everyone a consultant or everyone a partner doesn't mean that there are, only 2 levels of experience or expertise in the firm when you're out trying to sell the work to them?
Yeah, I think it does come back to relationships. So you get to a point where your client trusts you to put the right people on a job. So they want an outcome. They want it to be fixed. So very rarely do I have conversations with clients about, oh, he's a senior manager, he's a manager. They're in my conversation with clients, they're not interested in that. What they want to know is, who have you got? Who can do that and what are the roles they're going to play? And they're trusting me that I'm going to put the right people in there. So as far as my clients go, I don't think they're worried at all about what I call the consultants. But to go back to what we were talking about earlier, and then you do have the problem with procurement who do care. So very simply there, you put together a rate card and you use the nomenclature that they're used to. So you put down director, senior director, manager, and you put a rate card against it. And it's
simple as that.
Yes.
I want to touch on something around the growth journey, because again, a number of my listeners are either aspiring to launch their own businesses or do run consulting businesses and consulting practices. And I think the elements I find so interesting around growth is that as businesses grow, they change. One of the founders of my old consultancy, and he's been a guest on this podcast actually, Mohammed Mansour, I always remember in our company meetings used to say, and I've spoken to him about it on the show, is if we did things the way we did 3 years ago now, or we did what we did 3 years ago now, we would hate it because it's a different size business, you need different approaches, different structures. I'd be fascinated for you, what, if any, were the major inflection points? Was it as simple as going from 4 to 5? Was it 4 to 40? Was it maybe even something that wasn't related to size? What was it for you that you felt that you and the partnership team had to really, say, step up your game or change how you were doing things due to where the firm had moved?
So first an observation, that's a very good point. So if you take us when we started up, and you take Berkeley Partnership now, 2 very different propositions. And I would argue different people will join them. So when we started up, we attracted some great talent from the big 6. They were entrepreneurial people who wanted to join a startup business, very excited, wanted to join that. But those people would never join Berkeley now. Conversely, the people that join Berkeley now are some brilliant people from the big 6 who want to join a really great company, but they want to join something that is established, has got a certain amount of comfort and establishment. So they would never have joined Berkeley in the startup thing. So that's quite interesting. Now, if you draw between those a little cantilever underneath them, there's a point when you're neither one nor the other. And at that point, there was a difficult point in Berkeley's development, I think, when we weren't attracting the best people, because we were neither a startup nor were we a nicely thing. So I don't think that answered your question completely, but there was a point at which you either come around and start pulling up and beginning to attract the best people again, or you don't. So I think any consultancy I would be looking at, be worrying about that point when the quality of the people you're attracting starts to go down a bit. And that's the reason, I think.
I really like that cantilever metaphor. How do you advise others? How do you spot when that's coming? And then actually, what did you do to get yourself over that hump or out the other side?
Well, I'd like to say I spotted it. I didn't. I spotted it in hindsight.
Well, in hindsight, what if someone else is going through that? What are those indicators? Is it as simple as the CVs coming through the door aren't as good? Is it the grumblings you hear from the team?
Grumblings you hear from the team. The CV, you're right. CVs aren't so good. The sense of quality you've got goes down a bit, and it's very easy to blind yourself to that, which I think we did. And whether it was luck or judgment, but got through it. But my advice I would give to anybody is that will happen. Just be prepared for it, which I wasn't. And it's only when I look back I can see that happened. But you ask about points of inflection. So I think that it's more to do with, so that's to do with the people in the firm. But I think the more interesting one is the point of inflection about the management. So you start off founders, 4 founders, and then you make some more partners. So you go through a period when it's a little band of brothers, continues. And then it comes a point of inflection where the new partners start thinking, well, hang on, those founders, they seem to be running the place and not treating us as partners. So they have a bit of a kick up. At which point it all falls out and everyone sort of starts playing nicely again. But slightly different set of rules. And then so you go on for a little bit on that. And then what happens is the partners all start thinking, well, we need a bit more structure around here because, that partner over there is going off doing his own stuff, but we need to have a bit more of a concerted view of it. So you have another bit of a kick up, and then you have a few more rules. And I think I don't know what happens after that. I think after that, I don't know. But I think there's two points of inflection.
It talks to that point as well as the piece you made. You mentioned around the different type of people that joined Berkeley, the sort of the early entrepreneurial ones, and the or equally good but maybe wanted a bit more security people who joined towards the end. How did you stay responsive to what the different people wanted to create a firm and give a firm that is what those people who first signed up wanted, but also works for the new people? Because when any organization or movement grows, there'll be the people who knew the band before they were famous, and then the fans who like them because they're on the charts. And actually, how did you balance that too? And I assume, but tell me if I'm wrong, keep all of those people happy and on the same bus moving forwards.
Yeah, I think it's something that I haven't got the answer for, but it's one of the big challenges. Is I feel very strongly that there isn't a third party. There is no company that runs it. So I always used to say to everybody, the whole company can stand in this room. There's 60 of us, we're all standing here. That's it. There is no one else. So if you've got a problem, you think we're doing too much work in the public sector, and you say that to me, then my answer is always going to be to you, what are you going to do about it? Because we are the only people that can do anything about this. There is no third party. There's nobody out there doing stuff to us. In some ways that some employees want to believe there's a third party that influences everything and does it. And people that I wanted to recruit were people that had the initiative to say we're part of this. We're part of solutions. We're trying to do what we're all doing. And the danger then as you get bigger is how do you keep all the different subgroups happy? So just to use that example, there might be a subgroup that do want to do more public sector work. And there's a public group that doesn't want to do any public sector work at all. So how do you keep a sense across it all? And it is to do with leadership. So I wanted a place where the leadership was not in evidence all the time. But if you take that to an extreme, then what you end up with is a kind of kibbutz or somewhere that there's no leadership at all. So the balance is, how do you have some strong leadership, but only when it's really, really needed? Otherwise, it just all turns into a morass.
I really like that point around there is no third party, because I think so often the consultancy, be it Berkeley, be it whoever, can be used as the third party,
Oh, yes, yeah. No. And what it brings is it brings a sense of victimizing to people, Oh, it's terrible. I've been put on a horrible job somewhere. I don't like it, or I haven't been paid enough money. They have done this to me, and it's a very negative thing when people start getting into the feeling like a victim. There is no they.
There feels like there could be an inherent tension in there, though, that, okay, if I believe I've got control over my destiny, let's say in this firm, I'm on a job up in Newcastle, and this might just come back to the core tenets that you didn't, as an organisation, you don't do this, as a team, you don't do this. But if I'm there doing a job I hate up in Newcastle, was there ever a tension where people were maybe too proactive and saying, look, I'm not doing that?
Oh, brilliant point. Yes, you're absolutely right. So as you get bigger, this sense of community starts getting strained. So I want, any great community has this sense, which is I do the tough stuff because it swings and roundabouts. There'll be a time when I don't have to do tough stuff. And I'm doing that because I've got a sense of duty to you, who is in my part of my community, that we all understand how it works. As you get bigger, that does come under pressure. So the great example is willingness to travel. So Berkeley's issue, which is it states, we're not going to make you go on long-term out-of-town assignments. Some consultants take that as meaning I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Now that you do occasionally get some people and say, well, I'm not going anywhere. Now that is really unfair on everybody else. But as you get bigger, Some people think that's okay. I can just be the one that says, oh, that's a bit far for me to go. So it's not an ideal world, but that's what happens as you do get bigger. And that sense of duty starts, well, it's okay if I don't do this, but I would expect other people to do it. Yeah, no, and I haven't got the answer for that either. It is one of those things that come under strain. But going back to your point earlier, don't bring in rules then that kind of, just because one or two people are doing that. The reaction of most consultancies would be to bring a rule in, write down, this is under these circumstances, you have to do this, you have to do that. And that's addressing an issue because one or two people are doing it. And I'd rather just say, leave it.
Completely. And I really like the community metaphor, because I think, much like you would in your local community or your town or your village or wherever you are, there's a lot of similarities there. And I think the key difference between, say, the organizational community and your where you live is, where you live is it's a roll of the dice who you're living with. In an organization, you have actively chosen from the people who've come to you who to pick. And a lot of the things that we've talked about seem to, at their root, start with getting the right people in the community, in the commune, on the bus, whatever you want to call it. And I'd be fascinated around your approach to hiring to make sure you got the right people in the first place.
So we developed a really good set of interviews, processes. We put a lot of effort into doing it reasonably scientifically. However, at the base of it all, I think if you, as a good consultant, if you imagine a 2x2 matrix, and up the left-hand axis is skill, what you're good at, and the bottom axis is attitude, interpersonal skills, soft skills. So bottom left are not very smart, no interpersonal skills. You don't want to recruit them. Top left, a lot of skills, but no interpersonal skills. Now, you don't want to recruit them either. But those are the sort of people you might find in client sites, and they're typically the DBA or the database analyst, the bloke who sits in the corner. Everybody's frightened to talk to him, but he's considered to be the most useful person you've got. Bottom right, loads of interpersonal skills, those soft skills, not very bright. Clowns. You don't want to have any clowns as well. So leaves you with the top right, loads of interpersonal skills and loads of brightness. Now those are the unicorns. That's the talent base you want to get after, and there's not many of those people around, but that is what you should spend all your time trying to find. And that's the basis of the recruitment strategy.
And I'm terrible with metaphors that aren't sports. I'm not great with sports ones. But taking that metaphor, you're trying to find those unicorns. But equally, there will be people who have high interpersonal skills, high technical skills, who just, for whatever reason, they're not your type of people, or you're not their type of people. There will be people who prefer Berkeley and people who prefer other firms, or vice versa. How did you, within the processes, actually, how did you filter for that? Was it simply, you got a feeling about them? Was there...
I was used to say in interviews, I'm laying out my stall for you as honestly as I possibly can. I'm going to tell you all about what Berkeley is, what motivates us, the sorts of people that will thrive here and the sorts of people that won't. And it's up to you to look at that and decide, is that for you or not? And there's absolutely good thing to just get up from this interview and say, thanks very much, but it's not for me. And again, too many people go into interviews seeing it as a competition to get the job. And it's not a competition. It should be a fact-finding exercise to say, are you right for me? And that needs the interviewee to have a lot of self-awareness about what it is they want. So laying out the stall really, really obviously. So Berkeley's a good example, for instance, we talked about it earlier, but if you the sort of person that wants to be fairly autonomous, a lot of working on your own, great place. If you like to be working in teams all the time and you like a lot more support and you need a lot of methodologies and you need something around you, then it's not the right company for you. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're not good at consulting. It's just this is the wrong environment. So lay the stall out.
Well, and I really like that. And a lot of this comes back to the sort of the confidence and the view of the candidate as well, and the hiring firm as well of that. You're on a fact find. We all appreciate that as a candidate, an interview is about them, the firm finding out about you. But likewise, I think the firm it's about you finding out about the firm. I think it might be it's not the end of the market you deal with, but I know a number of people applying for graduate jobs, and businesses and consultancies have started to introduce one-way video interviews, which I personally think is one of the worst, the most abhorrent thing. Abhorrent is probably too strong, but I think one of the most upsetting things I've ever heard, because exactly like you say, it's entirely one way. It's not, I can't get a sense of what Michael's like and what Berkeley's like. I'm just talking into a machine. And I think
It's just nuts.
Well, I agree, but I think that's, the point of it's a tangent, but it comes back to that point you make of actually the interview process is about a relationship and it's a courtship like any other of deciding if a firm wants to hire you, and it's getting in the position where you're willing to do that. I think it's a really good piece of guidance. I'm curious to turn, actually, Michael, now to, we talked a bit about the startup journey for Berkeley. You also made the point earlier that starting a business nowadays would be very different. If you were starting it, would be very different to what you did then. And I think I'd be fascinated on your advice, because I'm sure others have come to you in this position of, if someone was listening to this and thinking, I'm going to start a consulting business, what is the advice you tend to give people in that position? Or what would you do if you were to start Berkeley again today?
All right. Well, I would, because who I am, I would start with, I'd find some partners, because I would want, I think one person on their own, it's very hard to cover all the different skills and what you need to do. So I would find one or two people that would complement my skills. So, I'm very good at something, but I might not be good at the other things it needs. So one is that. I think it's obvious fact, but be really clear about what you're offering the market. Don't try and do too much. Berkeley, one of the things we've, over the years, always been tempted to do slightly different things, but stick to the knitting. Has always been a boring but good tenet, I think. Expand it, work for bigger people in greater, more complex stuff, but don't go off and do something else. A lot of successful people, because they're really good at something, think they're going to be good at everything. Back in the day, a lot of your listeners are probably too young to remember, but Clive Sinclair said, got the first pocket calculator in the country, and he then decided he'd make some electric trikes because he thought he'd be good at that, and it was a disaster. So stick to what you're good at, no matter how good you are. And that's it, I think. Get some help to complement you, know what you're going to sell the market, and stick to the knitting.
No, really good advice. And I'm intrigued because of how long you were with Berkeley and what you've seen over that time. It's actually around where you think the industry is going, to that point around stick to your knitting. Well, actually, do you see that knitting changing? And that could be as simple as the offering to clients, or, more systemically. I mean, you made the point around people only spending a few years in consulting firms now. Berkeley was predicated on a long-term thinking. How do you build a long-term business in a world where people are thinking of careers in much shorter timeframes?
Well, again, that's a fascinating question, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, because something I realize is really important is corporate memory. So what instills into your corporation, group of people, how they do stuff, the tacit understanding of what this firm is all about. And it is what gives you competitive advantage. So I can sit here and describe to you what Berkeley does, but you couldn't go out tomorrow and replicate it because of all the tacit knowledge, the way people behave. And that exists because of corporate memory. Now, what's been interesting to me is exactly as you say, what happens now when people are spending much shorter times in companies? The memory can get lost. It can fall away. Now, something like Berkeley, it's the partners who keep it because they're there. But what happens if partners start staying short amounts of time? So I don't have the answer, but you ask a fascinating question.
Well, maybe, I always like to offer a round two on this show, so maybe we'll come back in a few months or years, and you can we can have another debate on it, because I really like that point around corporate memory and actually how do you sustain that. I think it's also a really interesting, and I know we talked about this before we came together for the interview, of actually how some consultancies and industry don't talk, and how people put too much pride on things that are firm agnostic, certain methodologies, and actually that corporate memory, a lot of the how we do stuff is much more nuanced. Your point of I can tell you everything about Berkeley and you couldn't copy it, I think is something so few people see. I think there's still a protectionism over that IP.
Now, the IP, that's what the consultancy, so you know how to draw an operating model. Well, we all know how to draw an operating models. You don't have to, you should share all that stuff. It just give everybody a shortcut to getting the stuff done, because it's much more about how you interact with people, how you influence people, how you bring a team of people together, how you move them forward. It's not about the artifacts. They're a natural byproduct, but they're not the things to protect and to hide. It's the way you do stuff, not what the stuff is. I think.
I fully agree, and I think things as simple as the starting premise of we start with what do we want to do, what is this a place we want to work, and build from that. So they all seem to come from the same same place.
And I often get occasionally get asked, have you got a methodology, in-house methodology? And my answer is no, because method one, if you've been at Accenture, if you've been at BP, you've got their methodology. If you've been to, I said, they're all basically the same. It's just some have got circles and some have got squares. But as long as you know how to get these things done and you've come across one of the methodologies, they all fit together.
I've lost count of the number of companies I've seen asking for Prince 2, and I am, I'm Prince 2 qualified, and I'm yet to, that was 6 years ago, and I'm yet to ever to use it, because actually those, I can't attribute it, but it's a boxer or coach of a boxer who said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I think it's largely the same here. Is you can have a great methodology, but if whichever person you're dealing with doesn't subscribe to it, or you need to, like you said, use soft skills to bring them on the journey. Actually, it's not building Lego. It's doing, that's not why people bring consultants in.
Yeah.
So, Michael, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm very conscious of your time, and also that I know we're going to have some lunch, so I don't want to eat too much into that. But I want to ask just two more questions, and these are ones that I ask all of my guests, and I'd be really interested in your take, and please use these as a guide, so take them where you want. So the first one is books. I'm a big reader, as anyone who listens to this knows. Love to get recommendations for books that have had a big impact on others, and I'd be keen to get your take, be it from the 30 years, be it from the last year. What's the book or books that you found yourself giving or recommending most to people, and why?
Okay. So the one that I always give to my consultants is a book called Trust-Based Selling. I think it's by David Green. And I was flicking through airport or somewhere, going through this book, and why I bought it was there's chapter, there's a little bit in it about the elevator pitch. It's an elevator pitch. He said, nonsense.
Okay.
I said, now, everyone asks, what's your elevator pitch? Your 30 seconds on who your company is and so on and so forth. He said, well, it's nonsense. He said, if you're in a lift with the CEO of a company, he doesn't want to know what your company does. He wants you to ask him what his company does. And that was enough. I bought it. Great book. It encompasses a lot of the way I look upon life. The other one, of course, that every consultant should read is David Meister, the Management Consultancy book. So David Meister, just as background, have to read that. And the other one that I'd throw in, as you just asked, just came into my head. I think it's called On the Subject of Military Incompetence, and it's a book which has got a number of big military failures: Arnhem, Boer War, Charge of the Light Brigade, and it describes them from the psychological aspect of the commanders and why it all went wrong. And I think if you read that business, no one's going to die, but some of the lessons that you can learn in that book, absolutely brilliant.
I really like those recommendations. I think, particularly the last one, what you can learn from, I think we can learn a lot from the military, and actually what you can learn from what's gone wrong as well as gone right, so you don't do it again. I think the managing the professional services firm, I'm intrigued, if only because, and I've shamefully, I've not yet read it myself, but my understanding from other guests who talked about it is it describes very much a pyramid, it's leverage model. And you've built what I can only assume is the opposite of the model he ascribes. What are the key things you took from that book that helped you in Berkeley?
No, so it's like everything. Read what other people think, and then at least make a conscious effort why you're not doing it, if that makes sense. But no, there's lots. Apart from the pyramid model, I think that it structures out professional services. I think his marketing chapters are very good. I think things about building relationships with your clients, how you kind of talk to them about solutions, not just trying to structure the problems. A very good book. I once went on one of his talks. He's much better in a book than he is talking.
Well, we'll put the recommendation. We'll put the recommendation for the book in. I believe he's now retired, so there won't be any more talks. But I'll put the recommendation for the book. And I like that point around, actually, even if it's a differing view or it's not your perspective, just it's good to understand it so you can think about it and then just decide where to take it. And I think I will also read the trust-based sales, because I think so often in consulting, people talk without listening. My space is more the marketing side, but the amount of thought, it's called thought leadership. It rarely ever leads, and it's not always got much thought, but a lot of what is put out by many consulting firms is really my thought on a topic instead of how I can help my clients solve that topic. But we'll talk further about that afterwards. So the very last question then, Michael, and I appreciate, given the way Berkeley's been structured, you might have to get to just give your recommendations for some of this, but the question is, you have three people in front of you, and you have one who is just entering consulting. You have one who is around manager level, so where you would start to bring them in, and you have one who is approaching a partnership or an equity decision. So there'll be that sort of what I would have known as director level. They might be about to go into a partnership. They might be thinking about other things, and the question is simply, what one piece of advice would you give to each of them?
For the first chap, I would parody Mr. Kennedy and say, do not ask what your company can do for you, ask what you can do for your company. And what I mean by that is take on everything. So I think people entering consultancy sometimes be worried about what job they're going to do, what's happening. They think too much about it. What I say is grab everything, because in any assignment, you can find the good in it. Don't look for why it's not for you. So don't be too picky, is what I'd say to the first people. Who's the second guy?
So that would be a manager. So sort of the most junior person in your, at Berkeley you would hire.
Yeah. So I'd say there, start working on your soft skills now. You are somebody that is a point where you are good at what you're doing. You are technically proficient. You know what you're doing. Do not be a subject matter expert. Start building relationships. Start working on all the soft side of the skills that you need to do. How do you influence people? How do you walk into a room and people want to listen to you? How do you sit there at a table with some directors and you know what they're saying is not what they mean? Get those soft skills. Start honing them.
And then the final person is someone approaching partner.
Approaching partner. So I would say, think really carefully that this is what you want to do. This is a step, as I said earlier, this is something that is not bestowed upon you. This is something you need to want, because you're going to spend the next 15 years of your life doing this, and you're not going to go anywhere else. This is now stopping all your other options. So just be really sure it's what you want.
Brilliant. Well, I think, Michael, that is a great place for us to wrap up. So thank you very much for today. As I mentioned to you before, and I haven't asked if I can use his name, so I won't, but a friend of the family actually who used to work for your firm was the reason I got into consulting. So I've always known a little bit about Berkeley, but it's been great to find out a lot more, and the story and the heritage and all of those nuances and where they came from. So I've really enjoyed this, and I know my listeners will get a lot out of it. If people want to find out more about you or get in touch, where would you point them to? Where can they find you?
Oh, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Contact me there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put a link to your profile there, and people can connect if they want to find out more. Well, Michael, thank you very much, and all the best for the rest of your week.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Climb in Consulting podcast. If you did, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast platform of choice, whichever one you may be using. And please also share this with anyone that you think could benefit from hearing today's interview. If you want to get in touch or give me any feedback about the podcast, please feel free to drop me an email. It's nick@climbinconsulting.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.